Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West podcast for episode 354, where this week you will be joined by myself, Charlie, and surprisingly it is me that is doing the hosting duties this week, which means we don't have either Gary or Ben, so that does obviously mean that I am joined by, I don't really know what introduction I should give him this week, because he normally tells me off that I big him up too much. But he is the tactical expert. He is the Lincoln City expert. He's also hopefully going to be a bit of a financial expert today as well when we get onto that in a little while. Mr. Chris Lamming. Chris, how are we doing, mate?
Hello. Very well, thank you. Considering that was a scaled back intro, that was lovely. That was lovely. Thank you. For anyone that is a bit confused by Charlie's reference there, we might as well do a shameless plug while we're here. Charlie and I do a weekly wider EFL focused podcast called the EFL Hub. Our esteemed colleague Gary Hutchinson, of course, is the driving force behind that for the written side of it. But Charlie and I will do the pod. So, of course, have a look out for that if you're interested in kind of wider EFL discussion. And Charlie is normally relatively mean to me for the majority of the podcast, but is incredibly friendly at the start to make up for it. So that's what we're talking about. But yes, mate, I'm good. I'm really good. To be honest, better than I probably should be off the back of a 2-0 to home defeat. Last night against Blackpool was a game. It was a strange one, really, because I've come out the back of that game feeling obviously disappointed to have lost. Obviously, I'm a Lincoln City supporter and I'm human. So I'm going to be disappointed to have lost, but I wasn't gutted, and I didn't have any kind of existential questions or anything. It was just a bit, no, that's a shame. But actually, there's a few decent things in there. So I'm all right from a football perspective, and also on a non-football perspective as well. How the devil are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm wet. It's raining at the minute. Not at the minute. I'm literally, sat under a roof. But yeah, it's bloody miserable weather. Which is never enjoyable. But no, I'm very well, just keeping busy as you always do. In fact, actually, I'm a little bit annoyed because I messaged my mate today. For those of you who listen regularly on the podcast, you know it's become a little bit of a running thing when I've been on the pod. I like to go out and play bingo on typically a Wednesday evening, but the mate who I go with unfortunately can't make it tonight, so I'm not going. I mean, I could go and just go sit on some old granny's table and make friends with her. Who knows? I could pull, but we're not going to go down that route. So yeah, no bingo for me tonight, which is very, very depressing. Means I might actually have to watch some football. Hopefully it's as exciting as what I actually thought yesterday's match was. Although I do very much agree with you, Chris. It's just, of course, it always brings the mood down a little bit when it's a home loss, but I actually think in the context of the last couple of games as well, there's still, like you said, plenty to be happy about. What I'm more annoyed about is the fact that Chris was, he was on, was it Sunday when you recorded the podcast with Gary after a 5-1 thrashing of Peterborough, and now I get to come on to talk about a 2-0 loss at home. So, thanks for that, bloody scheduling that we do. It must be pointed, okay? They must be able to kind of know when Gary makes up the schedule exactly what the results are going to be. But we have got a good few things to talk about as well, haven't we, Chris? Because this morning the financial accounts came out. We'll get to those after we've done the usual kind of review of last night's game. But first of all, what we do want to talk about is an outgoing, Chris. January transfer window, player leaving. Sometimes that can throw up a couple of curveballs, but less so in this case. It seems like this could potentially be a really good move, as Dylan Duffy has gone out on loan to Chesterfield down in League Two. What do you think, Chris?
I think it makes a lot of sense for everyone involved. Dylan hasn't had as much game time this season as maybe he would hope. Rico, of course, is probably our first choice there, or certainly was at the start of the season, but he was injured pre-season, so we were almost just waiting for Rico to come back. Dylan did start the first few games of the season in that role off the back of a promising pre-season, but of course had the betting issues kind of lingering in the background. And then Dom Jeffries has come in and recently really made that position his own. Last couple of games, I think he's been really solid in there, has played there previously throughout the season. And I just feel that we've got Dom and we've got Rico at the moment that are kind of fighting for the starting role in that position. And Dylan's just found game time quite hard to come by. I think he's just down the pecking order a little bit there. He's still only 22 years of age, of course. He's still a young chap. But the guy just needs to go and play some football. There was an opening at Chesterfield in League Two because of outgoings there. And it just seemed like a really sensible option for all involved. He got an assist last night as well in a 3-0 victory for Chesterfield over Bromley. So that's a good start to his Chesterfield career.
Yeah, look, I very much agree with that. Chesterfield are a good side in League Two. They were always going to be challenging in and around the top 7. So I think, again, it just kind of shows the calibre that a player who struggles to get minutes in our team is still able to go to a team who are as kind of high-flying, if you like, as what Chesterfield are in League Two, and they're able to really kind of push on for a potential playoff battle. Again, just like, as I was saying with JJ McKinnon, when he went out on loan, to see that we're able to send players like that out and they're getting regular minutes still in the EFL is really, really impressive from that side of it. Now, it's an interesting one, though, Chris, because we always talk, don't we, about development loans or exit loans. Now, Dylan Duffy joined in the January of 2022. So he has been here for a few years now, has struggled to really kind of cement his position as a starter. Do we think that this is one of those where potentially we're looking to give him an opportunity to put himself in the shop window before an exit? Or do you think there is more than enough opportunities for him to get himself back into a first team Lincoln City side on a more prominent basis than what he has done so far?
Am I allowed to say yes to both of them? Because I think it could go either way. It's interesting
if you want to be awkward, you know.
Yeah, well, always. I think it's interesting with Dylan, though, because I think there's been a little bit of an argument I've read online of people thinking maybe he hasn't had a huge amount of opportunity, but he's played 50 games. Not all of them have been starts, but I think he's had a reasonable opportunity, certainly equal opportunity to other players that have been around the club for a similar length of time. And some of them, of course, have since moved on. Some of them have established themselves. And he's still kind of just on the fringes at the moment, but he's still, of course, really young. So in terms of contract, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think if I did my Football Manager research correctly when I was putting the contracts in when he signed, he's out of contract in the summer, but we have a year option. I think that is where we're at, according to the statement when he signed a winter or two ago. So I think it could go one of two ways. If he doesn't play very often, it doesn't go too well, and maybe it makes sense for us to part ways. But to be honest, I don't expect that to happen. I think that's unlikely. If we do have a year option, if indeed he's out of contract at all, I would expect us to extend it, providing he even plays some football for Chesterfield. And that just gives us a few options then in the summer, doesn't it? It means that if he has a really good loan, he could come back in the summer with a realistic opportunity to stake a claim for a starting spot here. But also if he maybe doesn't and there are offers elsewhere, then it allows us to get a fee for him. So I think it's a really interesting situation for Dylan, but this is a perfect opportunity for him to go and play some games and showcase his abilities. And then I think everyone will just revisit his situation maybe back in the summer again.
Yeah, I 100% agree, especially when you bear in mind, like you say, you've got Rico in that position who is, probably more of the kind of the first team ready starter. But then you've also, like you say, got Dom Jeffries who's playing in there actually most weeks at the minute in that kind of same role. If we are kind of playing that position, and then we've again got the likes of Eric Ring, who has probably struggled a little bit for game time at times, that can also play in that same sort of position when it's deployed as well. So probably just for squad harmony, just as much as anything else, it's a great opportunity for us as a club and for him as a player. So we want to very much keep a bit of a close eye on. Now, that happened on, I believe it was Monday night that got announced, 24 hours before the game against Blackpool. Going into the game, Chris, I don't know about you, but spirits certainly felt really high. Felt like we had a really good opportunity to get something. I think especially after Saturday's result and performance, you kind of immediately expect something great. And then in the fact that we put forward an unchanged 11. Now, before we even get into the game, I mean, an unchanged 11 is again, really kind of promising when we have gone ahead and smashed Peterborough 5-1. Were there any kind of shocks for you? Were you expecting James Collins to be starting, maybe?
That was probably the question mark, wasn't it? That was probably the question mark. I think off the back of a regular win, let's take the scoreline and the emphatic nature out of the win against Peterborough away from the situation for a moment and just look at it as a regular run-of-the-mill win. I'm not a massive subscriber to you don't change a winning team. I think normally you make changes according to, particularly for a midweek game, according to physical load and also opposition. I don't like us changing too much for the opposition, but I think you want to adapt a little bit in order to try and create those advantages. So I think I probably was a little bit surprised that there was an unchanged squad when I first saw the team sheet, but then kind of justified it in my own mind a little bit in that, but we won 5-1 and everyone played well. Who deserved to miss out? No one. No one deserved to miss out at all. So it made sense in that regard. And it hardly went badly, did it, starting that lineup on Saturday? So it made sense in that regard, though I have to admit I was quite surprised. And you mentioned everyone being in a bit of a positive mood and a buoyant mood from Saturday. What I found very interesting, but also just quite comforting in a way, is that a lot of the chatter in the fan zone, there was confidence there. There was definitely a confident mood. But no one was expecting it to be for us to be as convincing as we were against Peterborough. Not a single supporter that I heard said it was going to be anything other than a tight game. I think most of us felt like it would be a draw or a narrow victory. I thought it'd be 1-0 to us, to be honest, so I was quite wrong in that regard. But I think everyone I spoke to, either in the fan zone or in the stadium, it seemed before the game kicked off that we were all expecting a similar thing. A confident performance from us, but a tight game against a team that defends much better than Peterborough do. And we're all kind of hoping for the best. And that kind of comforted me that we didn't have any real huge expectations of an emphatic victory again. I think there was a little bit of realism in the in the crowd, which was good. And so that's kind of lineup really. So to answer your question, was I surprised? Actually, yes, a little bit, but upon reflection, probably not after the manner of the victory against Peterborough. What about you?
Again, I don't really think the word would be surprised that we went with an unchanged 11. Interesting, noteworthy, absolutely, but certainly not surprising. I think there are certain players who really impressed on Saturday, obviously, and have impressed over the last couple of weeks. I think Freddie Draper earned his start again, and I get what people are saying, and it was very much in my thoughts on kind of coming into the game. Is there a chance that James Collins is going to start? And you'd hope that he's our kind of marquee striker signing for the January window. So you'd hope that he would be starting games sooner rather than later. But when I look at it, Ben House and Freddie Draper haven't done anything that warrants dropping necessarily. So I felt it would have been harsh on them if that did happen. So again, and then I think there's just certain positions that you just probably don't really change at all. I mean, when you look at it, and obviously we'll get into the specifics and the situations last night, but Rowan, O'Connor and Jacko as a back three is as strong as we can get on paper, and as what we've seen in kind of the past however many seasons now with them three. Okay, Lewis Monson might be able to kind of get his foot in there and be a part of that, absolutely, and be a part of the conversation, but it's not kind of surprising to see those three starting at the back together. So, yeah, not surprised. But honestly, I agree with you. I certainly wasn't expecting anything like Saturday because Peterborough, we all said that was one of, if not the worst Peterborough side we have all ever seen play at Sincil Bank. They were god-awful, obviously. But Blackpool were never going to be that. Blackpool were always going to be so much more stronger. I mean, even when you just look on paper at some of the players that they have in the team, you just think that they probably don't really have any right to be even in the league position that they're currently in. You'd expect them to be higher. They've got some real quality. CJ Hamilton is a player I am a big fan of. Albie Morgan in the midfield as well. Rob Apter was, I think he was actually voted as League Two Player of the Season last year as well. They've got some incredible players, so it was always going to be a much more difficult game. However, I think we came out, even from those kind of early stages, noticing how difficult it was going to be, but still having those kind of periods of play that were very similar to Saturday of us having sustained pressure, and it looked as though a goal was coming for us. Didn't happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I thought it was quite a tentative start to the game from both sides. Sort of first 10, 12 minutes or so, I thought it was quite even. Didn't feel like a huge amount really happened. And then Blackpool had a really big chance. They were really quick on the break. And as much as they didn't offer a huge amount of attacking or consistent attacking intent, they were really threatening on the break. And I think you have to credit teams sometimes. And that was quite scary. And they had created a really good chance off the back of that. And that kind of sparked us into action, really, because from there, I thought we were pretty good, actually. According to FOTMob, there's a really useful, like a momentum graph, which shows kind of which team was attacking for which period of the game. And then you can see where the momentum is. You can see a big downwards arrow from where Blackpool had a really good counter-attack. And then for the next sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, really, it was pretty much all of us without really creating what I think any of us would class as a clear-cut opportunity. We had really good territory. We were getting in some really good areas. We looked neat and tidy on the ball. We were winning duels. We were putting the ball into good areas. Big difference from Saturday is that Blackpool defended really well, really stoically, really well organised, just strong in the air as well as in the tackle, positionally good, and Peterborough were the opposite of all those things, really. So the only real difference in that first half an hour of the game, I think, from Saturday, genuinely, was we did score and Blackpool were better at defending than Peterborough were. But in terms of style, in terms of actual overall performance, and all the numbers back this up, by the way, it was all right. It was all right. And then a mistake and a sucker punch, somewhat.
Yeah, it was. And it was such a shame because Blackpool, the way they were defending their area, like you're saying, was really, really strong. We were able to have possession. We were able to have that kind of sustained pressure against them, but it was always really just on the outer edges of the area rather than really being able to create too many opportunities inside of it. I think just want to note, before we kind of go on to that first Blackpool goal, Tom Bayliss, especially early on, was the creator of almost every attack that we seem to have. Was really impressed with him. He kind of really took on that typical Jack Moylan mantle that we saw throughout a lot of the first half of the season. So kind of him stepping in and being able to do that again was really, really impressed with that. But then, Ashley Fletcher, who, proven championship goal scorer, Ashley Fletcher decides to go ahead and score against us, which it's difficult. It's a little bit heartbreaking. It's a little bit infuriating in terms of just conceding a goal, but then also the manner in which we conceded it. God, that was frustrating. There were mistakes. There were defensive errors in that goal. We all know whose errors they were. We don't need to start picking names out because all of the players that we could name are well and truly in credit. But there were defensive issues from our end, no matter what it was. I don't even want to call it complacency or anything like that because it's not going to have been that. It was just bounces that didn't go our way. It happens. It's, I guess, just a little bit annoying that it cost us the game yesterday and we then couldn't go ahead and score to overturn those errors. But yeah, as soon as we went 1-0 down, though, I don't know about you, Chris, but I still felt that there was one hell of a game on.
I did, yeah. I want to touch on the goal briefly, if that's all right. And you mentioned not singling individuals out, and that's because it wasn't really a single individual. I think Adam Jackson is the one that might take the blame. And we've praised the back three so many times this season, and you're absolutely right in saying that all three of them that started last night are massively in credit. But actually, all three of them had a role to play in that goal because Paulie missed his header, Sean kind of misjudged the bounce a little bit, and then Adam effectively kind of backed out of his clearance in a way, and Ashley Fletcher went through and capitalised. It was almost like a domino effect, wasn't it? And it was disappointing. It was very much against the run of play at that point in the match. And but I didn't feel gutted like maybe I did, for example, when Rotherham scored after in an awful match of football where we created nothing, didn't really look like us, didn't look like we had really many patterns or much anything that was kind of particularly rehearsed about our play. Whereas in this, we've been pretty good. We've been all right. But they just scored, and it was frustrating. It was disappointing, but I wasn't worried. And a big difference, just in terms of feeling, from on Tuesday compared to quite a few games recently, particularly in our poor run, is when we were on the attack, I felt like we had the opportunity to score. I felt like we were going to create something, whereas in some matches, just didn't really feel like we were going to create anything. So yeah, I thought we reacted to it really well. It was a disappointing moment, but I thought we reacted to it really well. Actually, from then until half time, we were again on the ascendancy, had a few shots, had some good opportunities. One big talking point was on 38 minutes. Just 6 minutes after the goal, Freddie Draper had a really big opportunity. And we don't like calling people out here because I think Fred once again justified his start because he played really well against Northampton, was not far off man of the match for me against Northampton, was really good against Peterborough, of course, scored a penalty, but a penalty that was very much, or a goal, should I say, that was very much deserved off the back of two really strong performances. And had played pretty well in this game. One thing I really liked from him was not necessarily his hold-up play, because we quite like to switch the ball with those long diagonals at times. And when we were looking to go longer, and we weren't looking to actually play it off Fred's head that often, we were actually trying to find Dom Jeffries. And what Fred did really well is he pinned and occupied the fullback that's marking Jeffries, so that the ball could just drop over their head, both of their heads, and land at Dom Jeffries' feet. So he didn't have to challenge for the ball. He was just there to able to bring it down and then we're in a really attacking position. Fred did that brilliantly. He won't get any metrics for that. That doesn't count as a duel because neither him or the defender touched the ball. It doesn't count as an assist or a pass. But it was really smart centre forward play. Clearly been worked on the training ground. So that plus his overall performance was I thought generally pretty good. I think he's growing into the team, but it's a big chance. It is a big chance. He's not a million miles out. He's about 12 yards out. Yes, there's a goalkeeper and two defenders between him and the goal, but you've got to hit the target. You've got to be honest, for me, you've got to hit the back of the net from there, and to skew the shot wide was, of course, disappointing. He had more shots than anyone in this match. He had 7. Actually, the majority were on target. Just the biggest and most important one, sadly wasn't. So that'll be the element that will be remembered from Fred, and to an extent, rightly so, because as a centre forward, you need to put those away. But let's not let that completely cloud his overall performance. I think he had some really good moments as well. But that was a huge opportunity for us because we had done really well to work the ball into that area, and it was a good ball in, and it was not a particularly difficult shot to control. Although we did have to take it first time, didn't have time for a touch, and that was a big opportunity. A couple of half chances then between then and the end of the half. But I went in at half time and I said to everyone around me, one of my mates that does the first aid at the ground, Trig, he came to see me, and we both kind of said, if it was 0-0, we'd both be kind of really satisfied with that overall performance. I think we've got a good chance of going on and actually winning the game. At 1-0, even though we scored 5 on Saturday, I wasn't that confident we'd score more than 1. But I certainly felt we'd be good to score a goal. We'd be good to get something out of the game at half time, because I thought overall we were okay. How did you feel at half time?
Honestly, the exact same. That kind of immediately when you concede in those situations, it does immediately kind of lower the mood internally, and you kind of start thinking back to the games like Rotherham. You know, when we or the game like, for example, Wrexham, even though we were in the game and you just think, oh, we've just lost 1-0, even though we were, a great side for it and we deserve some out of the game. And all that's kind of there sometimes in the back of your mind is, great, it's happening again, sort of thing, deja vu. But the kind of prominent forethought was, no, honestly, we're still in this. We are really in this. And I just want to touch on what you were saying there about Fred. And I 100% agree. I think even though he didn't get his goal yesterday and he had opportunities to do so, which again will always be brought into question because it's a striker, I think it's fair enough to question it. But when I'm thinking about the fact that there's a good chance by the looks of it that Ben House might not be, for example, starting at the weekend, if that is the case, then I would quite happily have Fred starting up top next to, let's say, James Collins. Because again, I don't really think he's warranted being dropped. I was really impressed with a lot of his performance yesterday. One of the key moments for me was in the second half, and as a striker, to literally run back into our own defensive half when Blackpool were trying to counter-attack, slid in, won the ball perfectly, brought the ball away, won the side of free kick in the attacking half. Like on like the 60th minute or something like that. And that, for me, just summed up what I feel like we know that Fred can do, but he probably just needs to do a little bit more of a regular basis. And I was really, really pleased with that from him. And again, it just showed that kind of desire to be getting the results. And that's what you want, especially from Freddie Draper as an academy prospect who's now getting more of a run of games and starting games than maybe he's ever really had in a Lincoln City shirt. So hopefully long may that continue and he can only kind of build on that bit by bit. But yeah, I agree. Going into the second half was really kind of hopeful that we would be able to go out there and get something. And honestly, again, we came out of the traps and continued to feel like we could. Although there was kind of a couple of opportunities either way just after half-time, I think sustained possession did begin to come from us. And again, their second goal felt like a little bit of a sucker punch.
Yeah, it did really. A couple of things. I agree with what you said on Fred. I think that's all fair. I forgot to mention this on when we spoke about their first goal, because the goal scorer, Ashley Fletcher. I think what was frustrating is he did nothing else in the rest of the game. Only had one other shot, was off the target. Only won one duel, lost 11. Like, just didn't do anything. To be honest, his strike partner, by the way, Tom Bloxham, recently arrived from Shrewsbury Town. Brilliant. I thought he was absolutely outstanding up front. Really, they played a really tough game, and sometimes you have to credit the opposition, don't you? But yeah, second half, I think it started off a little bit it toed and froed a little bit, and the goal was soft. So it's two uncharacteristic soft goals that we've conceded. That is really disappointing, but it's not concerning. Because it's so rare for us to do. If it creeps in as a regular thing, obviously that is a concern. But at the moment, it's been something that we haven't done too much all season. And again, it's all relative, and we're comparing it to pretty much every other club in the league. You know, we're really, really low for goals being scored off direct individual errors. So it's obviously frustrating, because I think at that point, I certainly felt, well, that's game over then. I felt we could probably get one back if it was 1-0 down. I didn't feel massively confident we could get two back. But I have to say, we gave it a good old go. From that point, I think our reaction to that was really positive. They did actually have a really big opportunity after that to make it 3-0, whereas actually Jacob made a good save. But from that moment, it was all us. Now, of course, you'd expect that, because Blackpool are good defensively, and they just defended their box. They just defended deep. They didn't really press us all game, but they sat even deeper after that second goal, as they should. At 2-0 up away from home, and they defended their goal superbly. We had 6 blocked shots that were on target, so it doesn't count as an on-shot target, but it counts as a blocked shot. You don't know where it's going to end up, of course. So that's a high number, by the way, everybody. 6 is a lot more than you normally see, and that's because they were throwing their bodies on the line. We created a few decent opportunities. We had one huge opportunity, which of course was ruled out for offside. Now, I don't think it's offside. It's really tight, always quite difficult to see. If it goes in, despite me saying I don't think we was going to score 2, but if that goes in with how we were playing at that point, then you fancy us to get another one, or at least throw the kitchen sink at it. So I think that's just the way you get the look of the draw sometimes, don't we? You know, Ethan Hamilton came on against Peterborough United, scored with his first touch off the back of 2 deflections, and it just trickled in the net. Peterborough didn't get given a penalty, which maybe they should have been given one at 2-0 on Saturday. We got a little bit of fortune. We played really well, and we punished an incredibly poor side. But we had a little bit of good fortune as well against Blackpool. We made a couple of mistakes, a little bit of bad luck against a team that defended really, really well. And yeah, there wasn't that much different in this game compared to Peterborough, other than the opposition, and of course, the most important stat of them all, the scoreline. So yeah, I think we had a really good old go. What you mentioned there about Fred and James Collins, though, again, we can agree to disagree. We're allowed to do that, aren't we? I don't think they should play together very often, just because I think they're too similar. And I think our worst attacking output, despite them combining once for a shot, I think our worst attacking output during the game was when it was those two as our front two. When Jovan came on and played with Collins, I think it added a lot more threat to our play. I think we had a lot more pace. We had a lot more carrying ability as well. So, yeah, I think it's horses for courses. I think you need to get the pairings right. And I think that, you'll Michael and the team know that better than me, don't they? And they'll learn what works best as the weeks tick by. But yeah, I suppose the overriding factor is we actually played all right, but we gave away 2 soft goals against a team that doesn't give much in regards to opportunities their end, and that was that, really.
I think what's frustrating, and I said this before we came on air, because I am frustrated by yesterday's result, and I'm not frustrated at the players. I'm not frustrated at Michael Skubala. I'm not frustrated at the club. I'm not frustrated at anyone. I'm frustrated for them because I'm frustrated at the fact that Blackpool defended really well. I'm frustrated at the fact that, a couple of mistakes were made, but we then couldn't overturn it. I'm frustrated at the fact that, quite frankly, we probably should have had at least one. It was onside. But, heat of the moment, that many bodies, obviously you can't really tell. So, I'm not going to bash the lino and just say I'm frustrated at him. I'm just frustrated for the team because they deserved something out yesterday. I really do believe they did. When that second goal went in, I was sat there whatever time it was, I'm thinking, do you know what? I think I might just go to bed. But then I was thinking, no, do you know what? It's about time that we get the opportunity to really turn something around. It's not really something that I think we've had the opportunity to do so far this season. Last time I can really think that we've even earned some proper points from a losing position would have been Blackpool away when we drew 1-1. We've not really had that kind of a proper comeback so far this year. And I felt like yesterday...
we came back from a goal down against Stockport. That was 1-0 down towards the start of the season. Was that after? No, that might have been before. Can't they all roll into one now, don't they?
I think that was before that. But, it was... We haven't really had that proper kind of comeback game to really celebrate. And honestly, I still felt, even though it was the 60th minute mark or whatever it was, and we were 2-0 down, really did feel like we had the capability to do it yesterday. And I think the chances we created, if you just took it as though the chances we created, even though obviously if it had been 2-1, we may not have had those chances, etc., etc. If we just took those chances, we probably could have scored 3. James Collins had a couple of amazing opportunities where the ball was fed through to him perfectly. I mean, that one from Ethan Hamilton where he just got so much space in front of him and just kept running and slid, honestly, a perfect ball into James Collins, who then just unfortunately couldn't quite find the back of the net. Again, that was just one of those opportunities that you're cursing when you are 2-0 down. If you're 2-0 up, no one cares about it. But of course, you're cursing that when you're 2-0 down. So, yeah, it is what it is. We lost the game. I'm not frustrated. I'm not worried. I am actually more excited going into the next few matches based off the performance than I am worried based off the result.
Yeah, we created some chances. We played all right. We gave up some uncharacteristic goals. So that happens, doesn't it? It's a shame they 2 happened in the same game. It's not like us, so I don't expect that to happen too regularly again. I think the big difference for me is we're creating chances and we're looking like we could score when we attack, and that's nice again because that hasn't been something that's been too apparent for quite some time now. I suppose it's just a couple of things to touch on. I haven't done any stats yet, have I? So I suppose I ought to put some in there because actually these are quite interesting because we're saying we felt all right, and I think hopefully most fans probably felt the same leaving the game, thinking we played all right there, but we just got on the wrong side of a bad result. And you're right to feel like that. So 60% possession, but that's unlike us. But I think that's partly down to Blackpool. What I will say is, of course, all of these statistics will take one big factor into account, which is game state, because Blackpool scored, didn't change their approach too much, scored again, and then changed a little bit in regards to sitting deeper, even more compact. But they were quite compact for the majority of the game. They didn't change their style hugely, but of course, once they're 2-0 down, they're going to retreat. They're going to play narrower, and they're going to defend their box. So, of course, you expect the team that's chasing to have more of the ball, create more chances, etc., etc. We haven't always done that. I think to put the other side of it, when we had the opportunity to do so, we haven't always done it. But yeah, 60% of the ball, 17 shots to 10. But the big two for me really is passes in opposition half. So just to show like the dominance. So if you're looking at possession, but only counting it in each half, so how much of the ball did we have in their half compared to how much of the ball did they have in our half? The balance would be 73% to us and 27% to them. We had almost 200 passes accurate in their half. They only had 74 in ours. That's a really good indication of dominance. And then when you actually get into the box, though, because sometimes you can do that, you can horseshoe it, like Arsenal always used to under Wenger. You could do almost what Birmingham sometimes have been criticised of this season, which is having loads of the ball but having no penetration. But actually, we had 39 touches in the box. They only had 15. That averages around, about 72, 73% compared to 28 for them. Like, we did everything right other than put the ball in the net. And the difference with that statement this time round is that at least we looked like we could put the ball in the net. At least we created the chances. We just didn't. It was literally that final action. What we've been missing for a few weeks is the pass to create the final action. At least it's just that final action now. So, yeah, feeling all right. Couple of special mentions. We mentioned Tom Bloxham. Thought he was, one again, really good. Sometimes you have to put the opposition. I thought he was superb. And Rob Apter, you mentioned him earlier. I thought he was really good on the right wing, cutting inside on his left foot, delivered some excellent crosses. Really, really difficult to defend against. For us, I think it's good that the subs made an impact. I think all four. I think Collins, Jovan, Hamilton and Hackett all had good games when they came on. Tom Bayliss was really, really good all the way through. Really creative. And Ethan Arahan, I thought one of his best games I've seen him play. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. I thought he was head and shoulders the best player on the park and didn't deserve to be on the losing side. And if you'd asked me, just on feel, what do you think the result should have been? I'd have said 1-1. And XG suggests that that's probably about right as well. So, yeah, that's kind of it. But there is one last point I would like to put on. This is in relation to a comment in the chat by UTI saying Rowan was poor. I heard that a little bit, and I have to admit I've got a friend called Joe, and it's confusing. I've got two friends called Joe. There's Joe who I sit next to, and then another friend called Joe, and it's the other one. He is a person who isn't a huge fan of Sean Rowan. You know, we're all allowed our opinions, aren't we? And I am very much in the opposite camp. I am very much a defender of Sean Rowan. I think he's an incredibly good footballer for us. Pretty much guaranteed starter. I think he's a really, really good player. Not just a good prospect, a good player now. And he said, you know, sometimes it's confirmation bias, isn't it? You look out for mistakes. And there's a couple of overhit crosses from Rowan yesterday. He goes, honestly, I just don't know what you see in him. And I kind of left the game yesterday thinking, it probably wasn't Sean's best game. However, so I thought, I'll just see that. Am I right? Am I right in thinking that? Is Joe right in thinking that? How accurate actually is this? And it just goes to show that our eyes just don't tell us the whole story. We missed so much. All of us missed stuff. Sean Rowan had more touches. Yes, sorry. Had more touches than anyone else on the pitch. Had the highest pass accuracy, 96% pass accuracy. 52 of his 54 passes were accurate. Only Ethan Arahan on the pitch made more accurate passes, 2 more accurate, but a lower percentage accuracy. He created 2 chances, 7 passes into the final third that were accurate, which was, I think, 4th on the whole pitch. 6 out of 7 long balls were accurate, won 100% of his tackles. Put the most crosses in out of anyone on the pitch. The only criticism is that only 2 of his crosses were successful in that they got a Lincoln City player on the end of them. And there were a couple, 2 or 3 overhit and misplaced passes, and that sticks in people's minds and think, oh, Rowan didn't play too well. It's understandable because that's the stuff that you notice. That's the stuff that you see. It was the same for me. And part of that will also be some of them were good balls in, but defenders got there first, so it counts as an unsuccessful pass. But some of them, of course, weren't brilliant crosses. But actually, other than probably a couple of overhit crosses, Sean Rowan played not just fine, but really good yesterday. And I say I'm normally a defender, but I kind of came out thinking, oh, it probably wasn't his best game. But actually, I was wrong as well. So, I don't like to just bring the stats to say I'm right. I'm happy to share them when I'm wrong as well.
It's weird because I, started scrolling on social media at the end of the game last night and just did it again this morning just because you fall into the bad habit, don't you? Sometimes I just did a little bit of scrolling. And I saw there was a bit of, I don't say hatred because that's far too harsh, but there was a good bit of criticism that was aimed at Sean Rowan after the game. And I'll be honest, I was surprised. I didn't think he had an outlandishly bad game. Obviously, there was a couple of missed passes, but quite frankly,
literally two.
Well, yeah. but I think also when you think about, especially kind of towards the end of a game when we're maybe trying to rush the ball forward a little bit more, your playmaking centre half, if you like, in Sean Rowan is kind of more likely to be misplacing those passes. And the fact he did only misplace two, again, like you say, is actually really impressive. So yeah, I was certainly a bit shocked at that, and I'm not too surprised that the stats don't necessarily back that up too much. So were you going to say something?
No, sorry, I was thinking that's break time.
That's exactly what I was going to go do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for a short word from our sponsors whilst we say hello to YouTube. And then when we get back, we shall go ahead and look into the financial accounts that came out this morning and look ahead to Wigan on Saturday.
Hello, YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. How are we doing?
A couple of things. Hello, everyone that said hello. It's very kind of you. Harry Jackson, good question. Evening, lads. Chris, a question for you, or for anyone, I think. Has Bayliss been playing as a centre attacking midfielder or a centre midfielder as One Football and BBC Radio Lincolnshire have his position differently in the lineup? Both, to be honest. I wouldn't read too much into the actual kind of dots on a football pitch because it's so fluid. And what we tend to do is play Ethan around deeper, two players slightly ahead of him. Recently, it's been McGrandles and Bayliss. Bayliss has maybe been a slightly more advanced than McGrandles, but what we tend to do is if it's on his side, he will drift quite wide to link with the wing back and often the outside centre back on that side as well to create a little triangle there. So he tends to be almost like a half winger in that role. But when the ball's on the other side of the pitch, he'll be ahead of Ethan Arahan. But out of possession, he'll be kind of next to McGrandles. So it's kind of a little bit of all. It's quite a fluid 3-8 role. So yeah, they're kind of both right and both wrong because it's quite fluid. It's quite fluid, really. What else we got on here?
Going to let you get them up.
Yeah, we've got evening to enjoy your fishing. It looks like you've got a fan of your own. Enjoy your fishing there at the bottom, which is lovely to see. And whoever UTI is, really interesting. Actually, I didn't know this. I'd be interested to see where you're getting that information from. Not saying it's wrong, by the way. Just interested to see it. Saying that Rowan has lost possession per game out of the most per game out of every single player in League One. That would surprise me if that's the case. I would say he does play a lot of long passes, which is obviously less likely to be successful than a short pass. And also, we don't always play to win the first ball. We often play to win the seconds. So we saw that quite a lot on actually last night. I thought we went diagonal quite a lot. We didn't win that first one. So if we go from right to left, for example, then we've often had both the wing back. We had Bayliss and often someone else close by. So if the wing back didn't win the header, it often was dropped to someone unmarked. So I wouldn't read too much into that. But it's interesting because I didn't know that was the case. I will see if that's the case. But yeah, genuinely let me know where you found that from because it'd be interesting to have a look at because, again, I didn't think Sean had a brilliant game last night, but the statistics that I've seen actually show that he was perfectly solid. Other than
so, according to where we get our stats, Chris, in terms of Sean Rowan compared to everybody else in his position. So I assume for this, they're going to be including both centre-backs and left-backs. Okay, he has, in terms of his kind of passing accuracy, first of all, 65.6%.
So that includes short and long passes, I guess.
Yeah, which is only in the 10th percentile of everybody in his position, which is very low. That's totally fair enough. However, his accurate long balls, his number of accurate long balls per 90 is 5.61, which is in the 98th percentile, showing he's one of the best in his position for that. However, his accuracy overall for his long balls is 35%, which is literally dead middle of the road for those in his position.
So he has a high number of successful ones because he attempts a high number of them because of how we play, basically. Okay.
He has also created the most chances from any player in his position per 90 with 1.18. And he has also got the highest expected assists per 90 for anyone in his position with 0.1 in the whole of League One in his position. Correct.
Very interesting.
So Sean Rowan, I think that he is a very, very good player. I think that there are a few things that potentially we need to look at, is whether it's his role that's kind of constituting some of those stats, because that's always going to be part of it. It's always going to be based on the tactics just as much as it is based on the player. If you've got two strikers, but one's maybe set up to be more of that forward playing poacher, they might have more goals than their other one. It doesn't mean that the other striker in that strike partnership is worse. It just means that, one is set up to maybe score a few more goals. So potentially there's a couple of interesting points around there. But it's an interesting discussion with Sean Rowan, isn't it?
It is. And I'd be interested to do that amount of digging with every single player in the squad, because there'll be some things that none of us have seen yet, probably, that are there staring various people in the face. But I'm also really conscious, mate, that we have got a big old discussion to do about our finances. So let's crack on with that, shall we?
Right. Let's bring the non-YouTube lot. Bring them lot back. And thank you very much for whichever company it was that was giving us an advert there. Never know who it actually is. Gary sorts all that stuff out, so I'll leave it to him. Either way, we will quite happily take the advert on them, so thank you. Right, as I promised before the break, we have got the financial accounts to talk through. Now, they got released first thing this morning. I believe it's sort of 9 a.m. Now, plenty of interesting discussion points in there, starting off with, of course, kind of the key message of what our mission is. Our mission being to win, but to also develop. A number of different ways that we try and do that, through sporting success, supporter engagement, through just different stakeholders, whether that be sponsorships, directors, anything like that. And then, of course, our social impact on the community, as, of course, Gary is discussing plenty with the foundation at the moment about the many ways that they help the local community and further afield as well. But then in terms of the actual numbers, of course, there's plenty to talk about. But the overarching headline is Lincoln City once again did go ahead and make a loss of quite a high loss, almost £3 million once again. Now, Chris, we have spoken about this before. We have had the luxury, of course, of sitting on the fan advisory board, where the minutes of that got released about a week or two ago. And in there, as it stated, and as we'll repeat here, we've got shown some of this information a little bit earlier. But of course, there's nothing kind of in there that we can't discuss. So, Chris, overall, 2.9 million pound loss, more or less the same as what it has been last season. I think the season before was just a little bit lower, at just around kind of the 2 million flat mark. As a base level, what's your immediate thoughts when you hear that number? Frightened or understanding and accepting?
Not frightened, because there's always context, and it's relative to everyone else in the division, isn't it, as well? And the country, not just the division, but everyone else, every other professional football club in the nation. So, firstly, I am not going to sit here and pretend that losing £3 million is a good thing. Obviously, it's not. That's not a good thing for anybody. But we have to kind of put this in the context of football, and also of football in League One. And it's mental. Football in this country is just broken, to be honest. It's the reason why there is so much talk around an independent regulator coming in and financial reform, hopefully coming in this summer. So headlines are, £3 million not good. I think there are some important factors, which is it's all budgeted for, and in our investors are more than happy to fund that. None of it has come as a surprise. None of it is debts. none of it is obvious for the fact there is actually a small amount of debt, which is just the investment bond from the Stacey West stands. The supporters that invested into that, of course, that was something that everyone signed up for, and everyone knows what's going on with that. But there's no external debt. There are no loans there. So, like, it's as odd as it sounds. In football terms, it's actually a really positive outcome. Yet, obviously, that's not sustainable in the long term. If you continue to lose £3 million a year forever, people are not going to keep putting that money in to plug the gap. But that's the same story for quite literally almost every single football club in the country. So I suppose from a Lincoln City perspective, anyone that sees the headlines and say it's £3 million, that's bad, it's scary, what's happening, it's not as bad as it seems maybe on paper. But obviously, it's not something that we want to continue with. And Kate's made a really good point here in the comments, in that, and this isn't necessarily a comment. I know you're referring to Lincoln specifically here, Kate, but I think it's a point that's really important for wider football, in that there will likely come a point where the investors stop wanting to put money into a vacuum when they're not seeing on-field progress. So in League One this season, there are so many football clubs who are expecting promotion. There are, and I forget the exact number, but I think it was something like 14 teams in League One this season whose budget would have been a top 6 budget last season. So that is 14 clubs who, approximately 14, don't take me as on that exact number, but 14 clubs who expect promotion this season and are probably budgeting for that. And therefore, 11 of those 14 clubs are going to be disappointed with their on-field success and progress, aren't they? So Kate's point's absolutely right. But I think it's also just really important context, is that that's what we're fighting against. And it's, we all want to have that new shiny centre forward and spend a good sum on a new attacking midfielder or a really exciting player. But also we want to survive, don't we? And that's the challenge. That's the challenge. How do you live sustainably at a way where the club is eventually, hopefully, self-sufficient, but at the moment, at least making losses to a level that investors are happy to support, yet still be competitive on the football pitch and with the ambition to punch upwards, which we know we have. It's tough. It's really, really tough. I think there are a few factors to that, which I'll touch on in a moment. But yeah, let's just get your thoughts first, mate.
Yeah, look, I get the worry. I get that people are worried, first of all, just about Lincoln City when we are losing this amount of money year on year. I get that, but for the moment, you've got to look at it as though we're not losing the money, because we are still technically in the black. So yes,
there's
okay, these are
£1.3 million in the bank still, I think, isn't there?
Exactly. Yes. So although technically we are losing money year on year, that is being taken out of this income that I again appreciate is investor income, and that could stop. But I think it's something that we spoke about before, and it's something that I think just needs to be reiterated, is that our income from investors is being spread out. So if one steps away, and I think I said it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and of course, touch wood, this doesn't happen for another bloody 30, 50 years. Clive Nate's pulled out. The Jabara family have already shown that they're willing to step up. If they step out, then we've now got the Fowler family who, I'm not saying that they're just going to plug the hole, but I'm saying that they can then either help support the football club in the interim, help maybe search for like-minded investors, whether that be in the UK, whether that be across the pond, however you want to look at it. So the only kind of way that I can see this kind of really being a bubble that bursts is if all of our investors at the same time just go, yeah, we're all out. Okay, then we might be in a little bit of trouble. But the way that I feel like we as a football club have structured it is, again, kind of really smart to make sure that we're future-proofing. And also, again, we're surrounding ourselves with like-minded people in terms of the investors who are first of all willing to kind of keep this football club's dreams of being a championship football club alive, in terms of the short term and hopefully the long term as well. And also, they're not going to just say suddenly we're out. Of course, they can do that. Everybody has free will, but we've kind of now built such a strong working relationship with them from club to board level, all across the fan base. Even look how, we don't need to say it. Look how Clive goes into the away end whenever he's here for an away game and little things like that. They're also invested in the people, not just the money side of it. So I think that's, again, something that we can kind of take a little bit of kind of solace in the fact of we are in a really safe position in terms of that, even though that overall headline, of course, does constitute a little bit of worry, but it's a worry overall in League One. And again, I just want to kind of touch on what you were saying there, Chris, earlier on. League One has become an absolute basket case league this year. It's been what, honestly, the Championship has been kind of called ridiculous for the past however many years, because you've got teams in League One. And yes, okay, we could talk about the likes of Birmingham at the top that are just spending millions and millions and millions of pounds on players, and in the hope to get out of the league. But then you've also got the likes of Burton Albion, who have I don't want to say overspent, but have been spending over and above what we've been doing, this year, and they're in a relegation battle. Whereas they were obviously hoping to be setting themselves up for either this year or the next year or the year after to be in a playoff battle. They may be back in League Two. So there are the league has really made a massive jump. We've made a little jump. We've regressed in terms of our overall league position in terms of the finances down to that final quartile, that fourth quartile. But that doesn't mean that we're in a bad place, because again, we are hoping that we're spending the money in the right way. Whereas some of the spending in League One has become a little bit what it was like in the Championship, is naive spending and overspending on the same players who have maybe struggled to get out of League One before.
Yeah, I think there's loads of stuff there, isn't there? And I think there's a couple of things to pick up on the chat here as well. So I'll pick up on Jonathan's made a really good point to the Kieran Maguire of Price of Football fame, the football finance expert, really. Said recently that he expects the average loss in League One to be over £4 million. That's the average loss. So I suppose if you're under that, you go, oh yay, we're better than average. So that's something. I think it's also worth pointing out that there's not probably, particularly at our football club, there's not many people that are investing money with the hope of seeing a financial return. It's not it's a financial investment in terms of money is being given to the club, but what they get in return is not necessarily expected to be from a financial point of view. It's to be part of something, and it's to grow something. It's to have that, to be part of a project. And, I'm not a multimillionaire, so I don't know how you motivate millionaires, but I'm guessing you still need to have a project to get behind, don't you? So yeah, of course, everyone doesn't want to lose loads of money, but I think there's always a bit more to it than that. But also, Walter's made a good point in here and saying that hopefully some player sales will help, as I believe that's part of the model. And absolutely right. It's worth bearing in mind that the accounts that have just come out are for the 23-24 season, so don't include this season at all. And the only summer outgoing transfer that's included in those, because it must have been close to kind of a cut-off point, was Lars Sorensen's, which means that Lucas Jensen's sale will be included in next year's account, plus whatever sales that we will get potentially, hopefully not, but anything that happens this winter or next summer will be included in next season's account. So absolutely, though, it is the model. It is any smart football club's job to sell players and buy them for a smaller fee, or sign them on a free, ideally, and sell them for a profit. That's how you plug the gap, isn't it? See, Wickham, as much as they've got a multi-billion-pound owner at the moment, which means that he can absorb the losses quite comfortably and it not really make a difference to him as a club. It takes a Richard Kone, £6 million in there. That keeps them going from a normal season for many. I think there's one thing just to touch on here, though, before we leave the finances, is why has it happened? Why is this happening? Particularly this season in League One, because as you mentioned, we have increased our spending in wages this season compared to last. Our budget is higher than it was last season. We had a mid-table budget last season, and now we've got a bottom quartile budget. So we're spending more, but we've gone way backwards in terms of budget. So that shows that everyone else is spending significantly more than they were last season, which is mad. So what's happened? Well, number one, Premier League is silly. It's got a ridiculous amount of money in it. So it's something that has been a criticism of the Championship for years and years and years, and is still the case now, is that you'll have a lot of clubs in the Championship who are chasing one big payday from getting to the Premier League. You can afford to lose loads and loads and loads of money in the Championship, potentially fall foul of the financial regulations. But if you get in the Premier League and you get that massive influx of cash, that just wipes it all clean. That's exactly what happened with Nottingham Forest. And look, I suppose you could say, look at them now. Who can argue with it? It worked, didn't it? Hasn't worked for other clubs, of course. But I think you have a lot of teams in the Championship who are chasing that big payday. So what then happens is that kind of trickles down a little bit, because you've got the biggest teams in League One, probably also this season particularly inspired by Ipswich Town, Birmingham being the prime example of that, of course, who again have the means to do so. So I suppose you shouldn't criticise too much, but from a sustainability point of view, it's baffling. Excuse me. But the aim is, I think, for the big clubs, and there's always one big club in League One, if not a couple of them. This season, it's Birmingham, that they're still attracted to the Premier League riches. They think if we can have a good season and then take that momentum into the Prem. So even though they're in League One, their aim is still the Premier League. And then you've got the other large clubs in League One that feel that they are Championship clubs. And there is still a massive jump in terms of income from Championship to League One. And this comes from the Premier League solidarity payments. So every single club in League Two receives £520,000 as a lump sum from the Premier League. In League One, they receive £780,000 from the Premier League. We just get that as a lump sum. There you go. That's yours to use. Every Championship club that's not receiving parachute payments receives 5.2 million. So that's 6.5 times more than what League One clubs receive. So if you're a Barnsley, if you're a Rotherham, even if someone like a Wigan, a Charlton, Bolton Wanderers, who have got big fan bases, probably feel that your right position is in the Championship. But also from a financial point of view, you can increase that lump sum income by 650% from one promotion, from one good season. You can understand why teams are thinking, yeah, we'll have a go at it this year. We'll throw a few extra quid into it. So why is that happening this season, even more so than it has done before in League One? And I think there's two reasons. And this is nothing to do with Birmingham, to be honest. They're kind of out there on their own, shopping in a different market. It's the fact that there are proposed financial regulations coming in the summer. We all hope that helps with this. Nothing signed off yet, by the way, but I think there's confidence behind the scenes that something will get agreed eventually, even if it's a watered-down version. There will be more restrictions in the summer than there are now. But also, there's quite a lot of, I think, new owners in League One. So there is, of course, in the last couple of years, we mentioned Wycombe, we mentioned Birmingham. Obviously, Wrexham have got a story of their own. But even a team like Huddersfield, Charlton, Barnsley, Bristol Rovers, of course, invested heavily this summer. We've already mentioned Burton Albion as well. So there's a lot of clubs there that have got new owners that probably want to make an impact. And I think that, in combination with it's probably the last season that anyone can invest heavily without any real big penalties, that has caused the massive inflation in League One. And I think whenever we judge it, and whenever we talk about what happens on the pitch, which is what all of us go to football for, I think it just, for me, it's certainly given me a real level of context, just to have that open. My eyes opened a little bit just to understand the actual kind of landscape that we're in. So yeah, it's tough, but my hope is that we'll be a step ahead of the curve when regulations do come in, because there will be so many clubs that will fall foul. Only 3 teams can get promoted this season, despite more than half of the league having promotion budgets. That's massively unsustainable, isn't it, as well? So I'm just hoping that, again, the long term is where we're a step ahead of the curve. But right now, it maybe doesn't feel that we're ahead of anyone. But that's that.
I think that's sometimes the frustration, isn't it? Because we try and do everything, off the pitch in the right way. And, we really make, as a football club, the effort to do that, to spend right, to not overspend, to have a structured wage bill and a solid wage structure that we won't just break on a whim. And yet we're lagging behind in terms of the finances of the league, even though we've upped our budget this year. So, again, that's obviously the frustration behind it, and I totally understand it as well when there is kind of that frustration poised. But I think, again, it's less of a frustration at Lincoln City Football Club, not just a frustration at the EFL, the Premier League, the FA, anybody who's making a decision when it comes to finances in football, that, the frustration is that they're not doing it well enough. But hopefully, like you said, in the future, we'll be in a much stronger position for that. At the end of the day, look what happened the last time there was some form of a strong financial regulation placed on League One. We got into the playoff final. So, there's already history there to show that given the tools and given more of a level playing field, we can do it in the right way. So let's hope that's very much the same for any future opportunities. Now, very quickly, because I am aware that we are now at the hour mark, talking of future opportunities, we've got an opportunity for 3 points on Saturday when we travel to face Wigan Athletic. So, Chris, how good of an opportunity is it for 3 points on Saturday?
It's a big opportunity. Yeah, really big opportunity. By no means going to be easy, but it is an opportunity for us to get 3 points here. Probably more so than against Blackpool, just in terms of style, in terms of how each team plays. Of course, there's always going to be the intangibles of how you slept the last night and how you feel on the day, what you've eaten, and just how switched on you are. Like all motivation, aggression, all these things you can never measure. But in terms of preparation, how did it look like we can beat Wigan Athletic? Well, their run is just inconsistent, really. They don't tend to create a huge amount of opportunities. There's only actually 2 teams this season who have scored fewer goals than them, just Bristol Rovers and Northampton Town. 8 of their goals have come from Thilo Asgard, who has just left the club to join Luton for an undisclosed, though reported £3 million fee. So their prime kind of goal scorer, but also quite creative player as well, has left the club. They are the team in League One with the highest percentage of shots from outside of the area. What that also means is that they are the team, therefore, with the lowest percentage of shots from within inside the 18-yard box. So that means they struggle to get the ball into decent areas to create consistent, high-quality chances from good areas. That's a good sign for us. And the player that they used to rely on to score from outside the box has gone to Luton. Obviously, there's more than one player makes the team, but that's obviously a good sign. Now, we also know that we're hardly free-flowing ourselves in terms of goal scoring, though we have scored more than Wigan. And we're generally relatively solid at the back, despite a couple of soft goals against Blackpool. As mentioned before, that's uncharacteristic. Wigan are good defensively, though, so they're maybe not great going forward, but they are good defensively. Got the 8th best defence in the league in regards to XG, and it aligns exactly with the goals that they've conceded. So they are performing really well from a defensive perspective. They're just struggling at the other end of the pitch. I think the big criticism, really, from a lot of their own supporters is they tend to try and be a possession-based team, have quite a lot of the ball in their own third. That's similar to Peterborough. They're better at it than Peterborough were because they're far more solid at not giving away silly opportunities, but they don't tend to penetrate too well. So they have a good amount of possession in the first 2/3, tend to lose it in the final. So if we can play similar to how we did against Peterborough in terms of setup, in terms of style, and in terms of tactics, I think we will be okay. I think we've got a good opportunity to win. If we don't make any silly errors, then we've got a really strong chance to win. Wigan won't give us as many opportunities as Peterborough did, but I think they'll give us a couple. And if we can take one of those, we hopefully would be good for a victory. They will play a back 4, but what happens ahead of that will change from game to game. So it's very difficult to see whether there'll be 1 up top or 2 up top and how the 3 or 4 in midfield will be structured. So, yeah, that's as quick as I possibly could. That's Wigan.
Last season, when we went to Wigan, it pissed it down with rain. I stepped in a puddle, and it was a bit of a miserable. It was a 0-0 draw. It was a good game of football, actually, even though it was a 0-0 draw. But it was still only a 0-0 draw. I have a feeling, especially off the back of Tuesday, that we're going to want to be able to create some more opportunities and hopefully get the ball in the back of the net, potentially with a little bit more consistency than we have done over, obviously, the course of the season. Wigan, again, are a good side. Hopefully, we're going to be better. Of course, that's all we can really hope for, isn't it? And that's what we'll be hoping for here on the Stacey West podcast for as long as Lincoln City are playing football. But that is the end of episode number 354. For those of you who do go up to Wigan on Saturday, have a great day out, enjoy it, and let's hope for the 3 points. We will be back again, I believe, on Monday rather than a typical Sunday podcast. There will be a Monday evening YouTube episode of the podcast. So hang on a minute, Chris. Is it Monday? Is it Monday and also another special day in the world of football as well? Hasn't it got some kind of a specific deadline? More information on that to come, but definitely keep your eyes peeled on Monday evening. We will be here. But until then, enjoy Saturday. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.